If you are a U.S. citizen living in the great state of North Dakota, you were able to show up at your local polling station on primary day, primary election, state-issued ID, like a driver's license, or with IDs like these, issued by Native American tribal authority in the state. Any of those IDs were valid, even if they didn't include a street address, as many tribal IDs don't. On November 6th, less than 5 months after North Dakota's primary elections, where all those IDs were all valid, now for the general election that happens next month, the big midterm election, you won't be able to use those tribal IDs anymore, not if they don't have a street address on them. Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp was elected to the U.S. Senate from North Dakota in 2012 by less than 3,000 votes. She was elected with critical support from Native American voters in her state. Now, just weeks before her crucial re-election bid, which may hold the key to whether Democrats or Republicans hold the whole U.S. Senate, the Republican-controlled legislature in North Dakota has finally succeeded in getting through the courts a law that could keep thousands of Native American voters from voting in North Dakota on Election Day. The relationship between how Heidi Heitkamp won her seat in the first place and how Republicans are trying to make her lose it now, this is not a coincidence. These things are not unrelated. Joining us now is O.J. Semans. He's executive director of Four Directions, which is a Native American voting rights group that's working with North Dakota tribal leaders to try to figure out a way for everybody in the state to be allowed to vote despite this new law. Mr. Semans, thank you very much for your time tonight. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you, Rachel, for having me here.
Can you tell us a little bit of the sort of lay of the land right now in terms of this late change? This has been wrangled over for a long time in the courts. It looks like with the Supreme Court's ruling, this is now settled that they are going to not allow people to vote unless they've got street addresses on their IDs. How many people do you think this will affect in North Dakota? And what's the effort to try to get people into the polling places able to vote, even if their old IDs don't have street addresses?
It's going to affect thousands of people, even 5,000 to 10,000. The street addresses is very common, maybe in cities, but on reservations, street addresses literally do not exist. And so by taking one stroke of the pen, they're able to at least cross out thousands of Native Americans from participating in the democratic process.
In terms of the scramble here between now and 22 days from now, when the election happens, the state has said they see no undue burden in trying to make sure that, as you say, 5,000, 10,000 people who are affected by this, that they can all get themselves new IDs, they can all get themselves street addresses, even if they don't have them now. And that the state says it won't be an undue burden, it won't be hard to do that, it's all doable. What can you tell us about the effort to try to get people either proper IDs or some other sort of workaround so people who've always voted but who don't have street addresses might be able to this time?
Well, actually, we are working with the tribes in North Dakota, and during the course of our visiting, we have come up with a plan in which we will take and work with the tribes in creating physical addresses for them to be able to sit at the polling place when the tribal member comes in and he can look at the map and say, I live right here. Then we will create a physical address for that individual on a tribal letterhead with a name and date of birth, and then he's going to be eligible to vote in the North Dakota elections.
Has the Secretary of State's office signed off on that being a way forward here?
No, we did send him a letter asking that he would, whether or not he would support this proposal. He responded that due to the litigation, he would not be able to respond to our proposal at all.
Wow. I want to read you something from the dissent in the Supreme Court on this. This was from Justice Ginsburg and her dissent when the majority of the court decided to okay this law. She said, the risk of voter confusion appears severe here because the injunction against requiring residential address identification was enforced during the primary election and because the Secretary of State's website announced for months the ID requirements as they existed under that injunction. I wanted to ask about that risk that Justice Ginsburg was identifying there in her dissent. Separate and apart from the new restrictions here, are you worried that people will just be confused about whether or not they can vote and that itself will be suppressive?
Yes, because of the fact that one election they are able to vote with this ID and the next election they're not, it's going to create confusion, but we're hoping that by having tribal officials in every polling place and having the maps with the districts like the court requires, we're going to be able to assist them in voting. It's not going to be easy. I mean, we're really scrambling to get this done and meeting with tribes and identifying the street addresses. And you have to understand, tribes are sovereign nations. They can create their own street addresses. They don't have to rely on the state of North Dakota. One of the things I'd throw in is that if that 911 address system North Dakota's talking about was really that easy, it seems like during the first court case, they would have sent the 911 addresses to the tribes, or even during the 8th Circuit Appeal, they would have sent it, or even during the Supreme Court. But they didn't do it that way. They said they want each and every individual tribal member to get their own 911 number. So that is just a blatant use of misuse, I should say, of power.
O.J. Semans, Executive Director of Four Directions, which is a Native American voting rights group, also a member, I should say, of the Rosebud Sioux Tribe. Mr. Semans, thank you very much for being with us. Keep us apprised over these next 3 weeks. I'll be really interested to see how efforts go in the state. Thank you.
I will, and one of the things I will say is Standing Rock will vote, and we will forgive the state legislatures and the North Dakota Secretary of State for their sins, because Custer already died for their sins. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Semans. Appreciate you being here tonight. All right. What he was just saying there about the 911 system, one of the things the state has said is that you can call the 911, if you don't have a street address on your ID, you can call the 911 coordinator for your county, and you can request to be assigned an official 911 system street address. And then once they assign that to you, then you can contact them again and request a letter affirming your new 911 assigned street address. What Mr. Semans was talking about there was, well, if they want that to be the system that saves the Native American groups, saves people who live on the reservations from being able to vote whether or not they've got a street address on their ID, if ever had it before. There's an easy way for the state to have done that, right? They could have told all the 911 coordinators in all the counties to go ahead and proactively do this. Or they could have allowed the tribes as entities to, as a group, get from the 911 coordinators all street addresses for all eligible voters in their area. They will not allow that to happen. They want each and every individual voter to go through this quasi-legal system themselves in 22 days in order to get this type of street address so that then maybe they'll be allowed to vote. Like I said, this is a heat-seeking missile that is trying to nuke Native American voting rights in that state. It is about Heidi Heitkamp, and Heidi Heitkamp is going to decide whether or not the Senate is Republican or Democratic controlled. It's just as simple as that. We'll be right back.